The crystal glass felt cold and heavy in my hand. It was a cheap prop, really. Part of the package deal the venue offered for weddings under a certain budget. Our wedding. I watched my new husband, Liam, as he tapped his own glass with a fork. The tinny sound cut through the low chatter of our guests. 150 people, a mix of our friends and family, all turned their smiling faces toward the head table, toward us. Liam stood up. He looked handsome in his tuxedo, the one we had spent weeks picking out. His dark hair was perfectly styled. His smile, however, was gone. In its place was an expression I had never seen before. It was a mask of cold indifference. A chill snaked up my spine. Completely unrelated to the aggressive air conditioning in the banquet hall. Something was wrong. He raised his glass. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of the warmth and joy that had filled it just an hour ago when he'd recited his vows. The room waited, breaths held in that polite, expectant way of wedding guests. "Thank you," he continued, his eyes scanning the crowd but never once landing on me. "Thank you all for being here to witness this lie." A collective gasp rippled through the room. It was a soft, wounded sound, like a single entity being punched in the gut. My own breath caught in my throat. My smile, which had been plastered on my face for the past 8 hours, felt like cracking porcelain. This had to be a joke. A terrible, horrible, poorly executed joke that I was not in on. I looked at him, trying to catch his eye, trying to find the familiar spark of humor that would signal this was all just a prank. There was nothing. His face was a stone tablet. Then he did something that broke the spell of disbelief. He placed his champagne flute down on the white tablecloth with a decisive click. He turned his back on me, on our wedding party, on the 5-tiered cake sitting behind us. He walked down the 3 short steps from the raised dais of the head table and strode purposefully across the dance floor. The room was utterly silent now. The only sound was the soft scuff of his polished shoes on the parquet floor. He didn't stop until he reached a table near the back of the room, one tucked away in a corner. At that table sat a woman I didn't recognize. She had long, dark hair and was wearing a simple, elegant black dress. As Liam approached, she looked up at him, not with surprise, but with a quiet sort of welcome. He pulled out the empty chair beside her and sat down. He leaned in and said something to her. She responded, a small smile touching her lips. They began to talk, their heads close together, creating an intimate bubble that excluded everyone else in the room. They looked like 2 people on a private date, not a groom and a guest at his own wedding reception. My mind refused to process what my eyes were seeing. It felt like watching a movie scene about someone else's life. The bride, sitting alone at the head table, abandoned. The groom cozying up to a mystery woman. The guests, frozen in a state of horrified confusion. My maid of honor, my best friend Sarah, leaned over, her voice a frantic whisper in my ear. "Kate, what is happening? Who is that woman? Is this some kind of insane stunt?" I couldn't answer. I just shook my head, a tiny jerky movement. "I don't know," I managed to whisper back. The words felt like sandpaper in my dry throat. I had never seen that woman before in my life. I risked a glance at my new mother-in-law, Clara. She was seated at the table closest to the dais with Liam's father and other close relatives. She wasn't looking at me. Her gaze was fixed on Liam and the woman in black. And she was smiling. It was a small, tight, triumphant smile. The kind of smile a person wears when a long-awaited plan has finally come to fruition. That smile told me everything I needed to know. This was not a joke. This was not a prank. This was deliberate. This was an ambush. And I was the target. My own family's table was a portrait of shock. My mother's hand was covering her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. My father's face was turning a dangerous shade of red. He pushed his chair back and started to stand, his expression thunderous. He was going to march over there. He was going to cause a scene. I couldn't let that happen. I needed to control this. As much as I wanted to crumble, to run out of the room and never look back, a different instinct took over. It was a cold, hard knot of something that felt like survival. I caught my father's eye and gave him a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I mouthed the word, "Don't." He hesitated, his body tensed for a fight. He looked from me to Liam and back to me again. He saw the resolve in my eyes, the plea for him to let me handle it. He slowly, reluctantly sat back down. I remained seated in my ridiculously expensive white dress, the symbol of a promise that had been declared a lie just minutes ago. The bouquet of white roses and peonies sat in front of me, already looking like funeral flowers. On the outside, I was a statue of composure. On the inside, my world was not just shattering. It had been detonated. Every memory of the last 5 years with Liam flashed through my mind, now tainted with this new, horrifying reality. Was it all a lie? Our first date? The day he proposed? The way he'd looked at me this morning and told me he couldn't wait to spend his life with me? Lie. 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 The word echoed in the silent room. The silence was finally broken by the sound of a chair scraping against the floor. An elderly couple, friends of my grandparents, stood up, gathered their things, and walked towards the exit without a backward glance. They were the first to leave. Soon, a few more followed. The spell was broken, and the room dissolved into a sea of hushed, urgent whispers. The party was over. My marriage was over. My life as I knew it was over. But as I sat there, under the scrutiny of 150 pairs of eyes, a new thought began to form. He did this to me in public because he wanted to humiliate me. He wanted me to fall apart in front of everyone. He wanted me to be the hysterical, jilted bride. I decided in that moment that I would not give him the satisfaction. I, 28F, am not a dramatic person by nature. I'm a planner, a list maker, a quiet achiever. I've been with Liam, 30M, since I was 23. We met through mutual friends and had what I believed was a steady, loving relationship. We wanted the same things: a home, a family, a partnership. We built a life together. We chose the light fixtures for the apartment we shared. We adopted a cat. We spent holidays with each other's families. It was real. It had to be real. But the scene unfolding at the back of the room told a different story. Liam, my husband of barely 2 hours, was now being joined by his mother. Clara pulled up a chair and sat down with him and the mystery woman, Ava, as I would later learn was her name. The three of them formed a tight little circle. Clara placed a comforting hand on Liam's arm. They were a unit, a team, and I was the opposition. The whispers around me grew louder. People were unsure of the etiquette for when the groom denounces his own wedding mid-reception. Do you stay? Do you leave? Do you offer condolences to the bride? A few of my friends made their way to the head table, their faces etched with concern and pity. "Kate, we are so sorry," one of them said, her hand hovering awkwardly over my shoulder. "Are you okay?" another asked. I wasn't okay. I was being flayed alive. But I smiled a tight, brittle smile. "I'm fine," I said. "Please don't let this stop you from enjoying the evening. The bar is open." They looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Maybe I had, but the thought of Liam seeing me run away in tears was unbearable. He did this for an audience, and I refused to give him the show he was expecting. My father finally came over, his face grim. My mother was with him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "That's it, Catherine," my father said, his voice low and firm. "We're leaving. You're coming with us right now." "No," I said, my own voice surprising me with its steadiness. "What do you mean, no?" he demanded. "You are not going to sit here and endure this circus." "Dad, I paid for this," I said, looking him straight in the eye. I paid for the food. I paid for the venue. I paid for that 10-piece band that is currently staring at me, wondering if they should start playing again. I am not letting that man or his horrible mother chase me out of my own party. This was the first real decision I made in my new, fractured reality. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt monumental. It was me taking back a tiny sliver of control in a situation designed to strip me of all of it. My father stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He understood. He knew me well enough to see that this wasn't hysteria. It was strategy. "All right," he said. "What do you need?" "I need you to go back to your table and act normal," I said. "Tell our family to stay. Tell them to eat. I'll handle this." He squeezed my shoulder, a silent message of support, and returned to his seat. Now that I had decided to stay, I needed to act. I couldn't just sit here all night. The pitying stares were starting to feel like physical blows. I needed information. I needed to understand the why. Why go through with the entire wedding ceremony, the vows, the I-dos, just to detonate it all an hour later? I stood up. The heavy satin of my dress swished around my legs. Every eye in the room snapped to me. I ignored them. I kept my chin high and my shoulders back as I walked down the steps from the dais. I didn't walk toward the exit. I walked toward the back of the room. I walked straight toward their table. The whispers ceased as I approached. It was like the parting of the Red Sea, but with more polyester and bad floral arrangements. Liam saw me coming. His expression hardened. Clara's triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a look of annoyance. Ava, the other woman, simply watched me with a cool, unreadable gaze. I stopped in front of them. I was the bride in my big white dress, confronting the groom and his new companion. It was a tableau of pure, unadulterated drama. "Liam," I began, my voice miraculously even. "What is this?" He didn't stand up. He didn't even have the decency to look me fully in the face. He stared at a spot just over my shoulder. "This is reality, Kate," he said, his tone dismissive. "I see," I said, my heart pounding against my ribs. I feel it now, a frantic drumbeat of anger and hurt. I have to push. I have to know. I turned my attention to the woman beside him. "And who are you?" Before she could answer, Clara cut in, her voice dripping with venom. "She's Eva," she said, as if that explained everything. "She's the woman he should have been with all along, the woman he truly loves." Eva didn't react. She just sat there, a silent partner in my execution. The words hit me, but I refused to buckle. "The woman he truly loves?" I repeated, my voice laced with a dangerous calm. "So our wedding today? The vows you made in front of God and everyone we know? That was all a lie?" Liam finally looked at me then. His eyes were cold, empty voids. "I told you," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the head table. "You just heard the toast." His cruelty was breathtaking. He wasn't just ending our relationship. He was trying to rewrite it, to invalidate every moment we had ever shared. He was casting me as a fool, a willing participant in a sham he had orchestrated. He then turned away from me, deliberately picking up his water glass and taking a long, slow sip. He was dismissing me. He, Clara, and Eva turned back to their private conversation, leaving me standing there like a waitress waiting to take their order. The humiliation was a physical force. It washed over me in a hot, sickening wave. I could feel the eyes of every remaining guest on my back. I had a choice. I could scream. I could cry. I could throw a drink in his face. Or I could walk away. I chose to walk away. But as I turned my back on them, a new, steely resolve settled in my chest. This was not the end. This was the beginning. He had started a war, and I was going to finish it. I walked back to the head table, my steps measured and deliberate. I didn't sit down. I walked over to the band leader, who looked at me with a deer-in-the-headlights expression. "I believe we paid for you to play until 11, I said, my voice clear and firm. "Please continue." He blinked, utterly baffled. "Ma'am?" "Play," I repeated. Something upbeat. He nodded dumbly and turned to his band. A moment later, the hesitant notes of a generic pop song filled the cavernous room. It was absurd. It was surreal. It was perfect. I then walked over to the head caterer. "Please continue serving dinner and drinks," I instructed. "My guests are hungry." The woman looked from me to the bizarre scene at the back of the room and back again. She nodded silently and scurried off toward the kitchen. I had made my decision. This was my party. I was the host. And the host does not run. Sarah came and sat beside me at the now mostly empty head table. The rest of the bridal party had scattered, hovering awkwardly near the bar, unsure of what to do. "Kate, you are my hero," Sarah said, her eyes wide with a mixture of horror and awe. "But also, what is your plan? Are you really just going to party until 11? "No," I said, taking a sip of my own champagne, which had gone warm. "I'm going to find out what this is really about. This isn't just him leaving me. This is a performance. It's calculated, and I want to know why." The why was the piece that didn't fit. If Liam wanted to be with Eva, why not just break up with me? Why endure months of wedding planning, the expense, the public declarations of love? Why marry me at all, only to humiliate me in the most public and brutal way imaginable? It was theatrical. It was cruel beyond measure. And it felt like it served a purpose beyond just ending things between us. My first clue, the first thread in a tapestry of deceit, came from an unlikely source. Liam's cousin, a quiet man named Mark, whom I'd always liked, approached the table. He looked deeply uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room as if he was afraid of being seen talking to me. "Kate?" he started, his voice low. "I am so sorry. This is unbelievable." "Thank you, Mark," I said. "I appreciate you saying that." He wrung his hands, shifting his weight from foot to foot. "Listen, I feel like I have to tell you something," he said, leaning closer. "I probably shouldn't, but this is just wrong." "What is it?" I asked, my attention sharpening. "A few weeks ago, I was at Clara's house," he explained. "I'd stopped by to drop something off. I overheard her on the phone with Liam. They were talking about the wedding. They were talking about the plan." My heart gave a painful thud. "The plan?" I repeated. "What plan?" "I don't know the whole thing," he admitted, looking guilty. "I only caught bits and pieces. I didn't want to eavesdrop. But I heard Clara say something like, 'Just get through the ceremony and it's all set.' And then she mentioned your inheritance." Inheritance. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and cold. My grandfather had passed away 8 months ago. He was a wonderful man who had built a successful business from nothing. He had always been my biggest supporter. In his will, he had left me a substantial amount of money, the kind of money that changes a person's life. But there was a condition. A strange, old-fashioned clause that his lawyers had advised against, but he had insisted upon. The full principal of the trust was to be disbursed to me upon my 30th birthday, but only if I was settled and married. If I was unmarried at 30, I would receive a much smaller allowance. I was 28. My wedding date was just 2 months before my 29th birthday. We had joked about it, Liam and I. We'd said my grandpa was smiling down on us, giving us his blessing. Now, that memory felt toxic. Mark continued, "I heard her say the name of your grandfather's trust, and then Liam said something about timing being crucial. I thought it was weird, but I didn't think this. I thought maybe they were planning a surprise for you or something." He shook his head, his face filled with regret. "I'm so sorry, Kate. I should have said something." "No," I said, my mind racing, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying speed. "You didn't know? How could you? But you telling me now? It helps. Thank you, Mark. Really." He nodded and quickly retreated, melting back into the dwindling crowd. I turned to Sarah, my eyes wide. "My inheritance," I said. the words barely a whisper. Sarah frowned. What about it? The trust with the marriage clause? Yes, I said. The payout is scheduled for 3 weeks from now, once the trustees receive a certified copy of my marriage certificate. The look of horror on Sarah's face mirrored my own. Oh my God, Kate. You don't think— I do, I said, the cold knot of resolve in my stomach hardening into something sharp and painful. This wasn't a wedding. It was a business transaction. He married me to trigger the release of my inheritance. But that still didn't explain everything. If it was just about the money, why the public spectacle? Why the toast? Why Eva? It was more than just greed. It was hatred. The reception eventually wound down. The band packed up their instruments. The catering staff cleared the last of the plates. Liam, Clara, and Eva had disappeared hours ago, slipping out a side door without a word to anyone. I stayed until the very end, until the last sympathetic guest had departed and the cleaning crew had started sweeping the floors. I was the captain, going down with my own ship. My father insisted on driving me to the hotel. It was the bridal suite, the one Liam and I were supposed to share on our wedding night. I had paid for it myself, a small indulgence. Now, the sight of the rose petals scattered on the king-sized bed and the chilled bottle of champagne waiting in an ice bucket felt like a cruel joke. You're not staying here alone, my father said, his protective instincts on full display. Come home with us. I'll be fine, Dad, I insisted. I need to be alone. I need to think. He didn't like it, but he respected my decision. He hugged me tightly at the door. Call me if you need anything. Anything at all. I will, I promised. I spent my wedding night alone in that cavernous suite. I didn't cry. The shock and anger had burned away the tears, leaving a strange, hollow clarity. I took off the heavy white dress and let it fall in a heap on the floor. I took a long, hot shower, scrubbing my skin as if I could wash away the memory of his vows, his touch, his betrayal. The next morning, the first call I made wasn't to my mother or to Sarah. It was to my family's lawyer, Mr. Davison. I explained the situation in a calm, detached voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else. I told him about the toast, about Liam walking away, about Eva, and about what Mark had overheard. Mr. Davison was silent for a long moment after I finished. Catherine, he said finally, his voice grave. This is highly unusual and deeply concerning. Tell me about the money, Mr. Davison, I said, cutting to the chase. He married me. We are legally married. The trust requires me to be married to get the full principal. What happens now? Well, he began, and I could hear him shuffling papers on his desk. Technically, you have fulfilled the condition of the trust. Upon receipt of your marriage license, the trustees are obligated to begin the process of dispersing the funds to you. But he's going to file for divorce, I said. That has to be the next step in his plan. Precisely, the lawyer said. And that is where this gets extremely dangerous for you. In this state, assets acquired after the date of marriage are generally considered marital property, subject to equitable distribution in a divorce. My blood ran cold. What are you saying? I am saying. He clarified, his tone grim, that your inheritance, once it is paid out to you while you are legally married to this man, could be classified as a marital asset. In a divorce, he could make a claim for a significant portion of it. Potentially up to half. There it was. The final missing piece of the puzzle. The why. The whole ugly, devastating picture. The plan wasn't just to get me married to unlock the money. It was to marry me, wait for the money to hit my account, and then immediately file for divorce to steal half of it. The public humiliation wasn't just a bonus for his cruel mother. It was a strategic move. It was designed to make me so ashamed, so broken, that I would crawl away and give him a quick, quiet divorce without a fight. He would paint himself as the victim, a man trapped in a lie of a marriage, who was simply trying to escape. He thought I would be too embarrassed to contest it. He thought I would be too weak to see the financial trap he had laid. He had underestimated me. A wave of nausea washed over me, so intense I had to sit down on the edge of the bed. He had stood there, in a church, and sworn to love and honor me, all while planning to rob me blind. The intimacy we had shared, the future we had planned, it was all a meticulously crafted illusion designed to lead to this one moment. The theft of my grandfather's legacy. The sickness in my stomach slowly morphed into something else. It was a cold, hard rage that burned with an intensity I had never felt before. It was the anger of being played for a fool, the anger of being used, the anger of being so profoundly betrayed by the person I had trusted most in the world. He wanted me to crawl away in shame. He wanted me to be a victim. I would be a predator instead. I decided right then and there that I would play his game, but by my rules. I would not file for divorce. I would not file for an annulment. I would not even announce a separation. As far as the world and the law were concerned, I was Mrs. Catherine Sterling, a happily married woman. I would stay married to him. I would let him think he was in control, all while I quietly built my defenses and planned my counterattack. I picked up my phone, my hand steady. I found his number and composed a text message. My fingers flew across the screen. "We need to talk," I wrote. "Not about a divorce, about the terms of our marriage." I hit send. Let the games begin. Liam's reply came almost instantly. A single question mark. He was confused. This wasn't part of his script. I was supposed to be begging, crying, or threatening him with lawyers for a divorce. My calm, businesslike tone had thrown him off balance. "My hotel, 1 hour," I texted back. I didn't wait for a confirmation. I knew he would come. His curiosity and his arrogance wouldn't let him stay away. He'd want to see the damage he had caused firsthand, and he'd want to reassert his control. I used that hour to prepare. I called Sarah and told her what the lawyer had said. Her gasp of outrage was validating. "That absolute monster," she breathed. Of course it was about money. His mother has always been obsessed with it. "I need you here, Sarah," I said. "When he arrives, I need a witness. I don't want to be alone with him." "I'm already in the car," she replied. While I waited, I made another call. This one was to a private investigator. I found his name through Mr. Davison, who had recommended him as discreet and ruthlessly effective. I explained the situation in the same cold, factual tone I had used with the lawyer. "I see." The investigator, a man named Frank, said after I finished, "So you believe your husband and his mother conspired to commit fraud, using the marriage to access your inheritance?" "I don't believe it. I know it," I corrected him. "I just need the proof. I need everything you can find on him, his mother Clara, and the woman he was with, Eva. Financial records, communications, their relationship history. Everything. Money is no object." "I'll get started immediately," Frank said. "You'll have a preliminary report within 48 hours. By the time the knock came on the hotel room door, I was ready. Sarah had arrived minutes before, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm. She sat quietly in an armchair in the corner of the suite's living area, a silent observer. I opened the door. Liam stood there, looking just as handsome as he had yesterday, though his tuxedo had been replaced with expensive casual wear. He had the audacity to look impatient. Behind him, like a malevolent shadow, stood his mother, Clara. Of course he had brought her. They were a team. "You wanted to talk," Liam said, striding into the room without being invited. Clara followed, her eyes sweeping over the suite with a contemptuous sniff. She was probably calculating how much it cost. "Yes," I said, closing the door and turning to face them. "Have a seat." They ignored the invitation and remained standing, a united front of hostility. They intended for this to be a quick, final meeting where they laid down the law. "Let's get this over with, Kate," Liam said, his voice dripping with condescension. "I'm a busy man. Just sign the divorce papers and we can all move on with our lives. We can say we made a mistake. It'll be clean. A mistake? I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. You call orchestrating a fraudulent marriage to steal my inheritance a mistake? Liam's face tightened. Clara let out a scoff. Don't be so dramatic. You were desperate to get married. You trapped him. He did what he had to do to get out. The sheer audacity of her words was stunning. They were already spinning the narrative, painting me as the villain, the desperate spinster who had ensnared her precious son. I trapped him? I said, my voice dangerously low. I looked directly at Liam. Did I trap you, Liam? Did I hold a gun to your head when you went down on one knee and proposed to me on that beach in Hawaii? Did I force you to write those vows about being my partner in all things for the rest of our days? He had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. It was a complicated situation. No, it's actually very simple, I countered. You found out about my grandfather's trust. You saw a payday. And you, Clara, encouraged him. You both decided to play the long game, to fake a life with me, a future with me, all for a cut of my money. This is ridiculous, Clara snapped, her face flushed with anger. You have no proof of any of this. Don't I said, letting the question hang in the air. I let my eyes drift from her to Liam. This was the moment to test the waters, to see how they would react to a hint of what I knew. Let's talk about the divorce you're so eager for. You want me to sign the papers. Let's say I do. We file tomorrow. What happens in 3 weeks, Liam, when my grandfather's money is dispersed into my bank account? A flicker of something, panic, greed, crossed his face before he could mask it. That's your money. It has nothing to do with me. Oh, but it does, I said, my voice sweet as poison. I had a very educational conversation with my lawyer this morning. He told me all about marital assets, any property acquired during the marriage. And since we are, at this moment, very much married, my inheritance would be a marital asset. Our asset. To be split between us in a divorce. The silence in the room was thick with their unsaid calculations. They had thought I was a naive fool. They had believed their own narrative that I was a lovesick girl who wouldn't see the financial machinations behind the emotional devastation. They were wrong. Clara recovered first. This is absurd. No judge would ever award him a penny of that money after what he did. Wouldn't they? I challenged. He could argue that he contributed to the marriage partnership. He could argue that the public humiliation was a cry for help from a man trapped in a loveless, fraudulent marriage that I forced him into. It would be messy. It would be public. It would be expensive. But he might just win. Is that a risk you're willing to take? Liam finally spoke, his voice tight with suppressed fury. What do you want, Kate? This was the question I had been waiting for. He was no longer dictating terms. He was asking. The power dynamic had shifted, just a fraction, but it was enough. I'm glad you asked, I said, walking over to the window and looking out at the city below. I don't want a divorce, not yet. You're insane, Clara spat. You can't be serious. Oh, I am deadly serious, I said, turning back to face them. Here's the deal. We are going to stay married, on paper, for 1 year. Liam stared at me as if I had grown a second head. Absolutely not. You don't have a choice, I said calmly. We will remain married for 1 year. During that year, my inheritance will be dispersed. I will have my lawyer place it into an ironclad, post-nuptial trust that you cannot ever touch. It will be legally firewalled from you and our marital assets. After that year is up, and after I am certain my finances are secure, I will grant you your precious divorce. Quietly. No fuss. And if I refuse? Liam challenged, his jaw clenched. If you refuse, I said, taking a deliberate step closer to him, then I will fight you. I will drag this out in court for years. I will file for legal separation and claim spousal support. I will subpoena your financial records, your mother's financial records, and the financial records of your little friend, Eva. I will make this the most public, most humiliating, most expensive divorce you could possibly imagine. And I will tell every single person, every reporter, every blogger who will listen, exactly what you did. I will make sure the world knows you are not a victim, but a con artist. Clara let out a strangled gasp. Liam's face was a mask of pale fury. And that's not all, I continued, pressing my advantage. Until the divorce is final, you will play the part. In public, you will be my devoted, loving husband. You will attend family functions. You will be on my arm at charity events. You will smile for the cameras. You will undo the damage you caused at our reception. You will help me sell the story that it was all a terrible, drunken misunderstanding that we have since worked through. You will give me a year of perfect public appearances. In return, I will give you a quiet escape. You're bluffing, Liam said, but his voice lacked conviction. The seed of doubt had been planted. Am I? I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I know about the house, Liam. The one you and Eva put a down payment on last month. The one you were planning to move into after you'd fleeced me. That was my first real shot across the bow. I didn't mention the private investigator. I didn't mention the emails I hoped he would find. I just dropped that one piece of information, a piece he couldn't explain away. The color drained from his face. He looked at his mother, a silent, panicked question in his eyes. How did I know? Clara stepped forward, her role shifting from aggressor to panicked defender. This is blackmail. No, I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. This is a business negotiation. Your son turned our marriage into a business deal. I'm just renegotiating the terms. You have 24 hours to decide. 1 year of my terms or a lifetime of consequences on yours. The choice is yours. I walked to the door and held it open. Now get out of my suite. They stared at me, their faces a mixture of shock, hatred, and dawning fear. For the first time since Liam's toast, I felt a flicker of power. I had been humiliated, but I would not be destroyed. They had started a fire to burn me down, but they were about to learn that I was fireproof. After they left, slamming the door behind them, the adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins began to subside, leaving me trembling. I sank onto the sofa, my head in my hands. Sarah was by my side in an instant, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. Kate, she said, her voice filled with awe. That was incredible. You were incredible. I feel like I'm going to be sick, I confessed, my voice muffled. No, she said firmly, rubbing my back. You feel like you're fighting back. You told them. You laid out your terms, you took control. But what if they say no? I worried, lifting my head. What if they call my bluff? Then you do exactly what you said you would, Sarah replied, her expression fierce. You fight. You hire that investigator and you bury them. But they won't say no. You saw their faces. You hit them where it hurts, their money and their reputation. They're terrified. She was right. The fear in their eyes had been real. They had walked in expecting a weeping victim, and they had found a formidable opponent. They had built a cage for me, but I was now using it to trap them instead. The next 24 hours were agonizing. I checked out of the hotel and went to stay with my parents. My mother fussed over me, trying to tempt me with food I couldn't eat. My father sat in his study, making quiet phone calls, his expression grim. They were worried, but they were also proud. They saw the fight in me and were ready to back me up in any way they could. I spent most of the day on the phone with Mr. Davison, going over the legal strategy for creating the post-nuptial trust. He was impressed with my plan. It's an aggressive move, Catherine, but it's a smart one. It puts the legal framework in place to protect you before he can make a move. We'll have the documents drafted and ready to sign the moment the inheritance is dispersed. Frank, the private investigator, called late in the afternoon. I have something, he said, his voice clipped and professional. It's preliminary, but it's significant. Your husband's girlfriend, Eva, is not independently wealthy. Yet, 1 month ago, a down payment of $50,000 was made on a suburban property from a bank account solely in her name. That account was opened 2 days prior with a single deposit of $50,000. Where did the deposit come from? I asked, my heart hammering. A cashier's check, Frank said. But I'm tracing the bank it was issued from. It's a small, local branch just 2 blocks from your mother-in-law's residence. I also pulled public social media records. Liam and Eva have been very careful. No tagged photos together. But their friends haven't been. I found a group photo from a birthday party 6 months ago. They're in the background, standing very close. This is not a new relationship. 6 months ago. We had been deep in wedding planning then. He had been coming home to me every night, telling me he loved me while he was already in a relationship with her. The confirmation was like a fresh stab wound. Keep digging, Frank, I said, my voice tight. I want it all. The deadline I had given them was 10 a.m. the next day. At 9:58 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Liam. Fine, it said. Your terms. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a cold, grim sense of purpose. The first battle was won. Now the war began. The first test of our new twisted arrangement came a week later. My parents were hosting a small pre-planned dinner for some of my father's business partners. It was an important evening for him. My attendance was expected, and now so was my husband's. I called Liam. It was the first time we had spoken since the hotel room confrontation. There's a dinner at my parents' house on Saturday, I told him, my tone all business. You need to be there, 7 o'clock, black tie. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the grinding of his teeth. Kate, this is ridiculous. Is it? I replied coolly. Or is it part of our agreement? You play the part. You are the devoted husband. This is your first performance. Don't be late. I hung up before he could argue further. For the next few days, I was consumed by a nervous energy. This was the first public test. Would he show up? And if he did, how would he act? Would he sabotage the evening with sullen glares and monosyllabic answers? On Saturday evening, I stood in my parents' foyer, dressed in an elegant navy gown. My mother kept shooting me worried glances. My father paced in his study. At exactly 7:02 p.m., the doorbell rang. My heart leaped into my throat. I opened the door to find Liam standing on the porch. He was immaculate in a black tuxedo, a perfect imitation of a respectable husband. He held a bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers. The gesture was so calculated, so perfectly calibrated to project the image of a man trying to make amends that it made my stomach turn. You're late, I said, my voice flat. Only by 2 minutes, he countered, stepping inside. He handed me the flowers. These are for you. How thoughtful, I said, my tone dripping with irony. I handed the bouquet to my mother without a second glance. Put these in some water, would you, Mom? Liam's eye twitched in annoyance. But he quickly smoothed his expression as my father emerged from the study. Liam, my father said, his voice carefully neutral. He extended a hand. Liam shook it. Good to see you, sir, Liam said, his voice smooth as silk. I'm sorry for the confusion at the reception. I had too much champagne. I said some things I deeply regret. Kate has been gracious enough to forgive me. It was a masterful performance. He was laying the groundwork for the drunken mistake narrative we had to sell. He was plausible, charming, and repentant. He was also a fantastic liar. I had to give him that. Throughout the dinner, he was the model husband. He pulled out my chair for me. He laughed at my father's jokes. He engaged the business partners in conversations about the stock market and sports. When someone asked about our honeymoon, he didn't miss a beat. We've decided to postpone it for a bit, he said with a warm smile, placing a hand on my arm. Things have been so hectic. We want to be able to truly relax and enjoy it. We're thinking Italy in the spring. His touch felt like a brand, a hot, unwelcome weight on my skin. I wanted to recoil, to snatch my arm away, but I couldn't. I was as much a performer in this charade as he was. So I smiled, a bright, false smile. Yes, Italy will be lovely, I chirped. The evening was a success, at least on the surface. My father's business partners were charmed. My mother looked relieved. But for me, it was 3 hours of pure torture. Every polite smile, every shared glance, every moment of feigned intimacy was a fresh reminder of his betrayal. When the last guest had departed, Liam turned to me in the foyer. There, he said, his voice low and laced with resentment. Are you satisfied? I played my part. For tonight, yes, I said. This is how it's going to be, Liam. This is our life for the next year. I can't do this for a year, Kate. He hissed. You can and you will, I retorted. Or you can face the consequences. You know the terms. He stared at me, his eyes burning with a hatred that was terrifying in its intensity. You'll regret this. I already regret marrying you. I shot back. Everything from here on out is just damage control. He left without another word. I leaned against the closed door, my legs feeling weak. This was going to be harder than I had imagined. Living this lie, even as a means to an end, was corrosive. It was eating away at me. 2 weeks later, the official notice arrived from the trust's administrators. They had received the marriage certificate. The funds would be dispersed and transferred to my personal account within 5 business days. The moment the money was in my account, I was on the phone with Mr. Davison. It's here, I said. Excellent, he replied. The postnuptial trust documents are ready. We need your signature and your husband's signature. My blood ran cold. His signature? Why does he need to sign? Because the money, as of this moment, is technically a marital asset. Mr. Rowai, Davison explained patiently. For you to move it into a trust that he cannot access, he has to legally agree to waive any future claim to it. His signature on this document is his official abdication of his rights to this specific asset. It's the entire point of the exercise, Catherine. It's what makes the money yours and yours alone, legally and irrevocably. Of course. It was so obvious. I had forced him into this arrangement, but the final, crucial step required his active participation. He had to willingly sign away the very thing he had orchestrated this entire nightmare to get. I had to get Liam to sign those papers. I arranged another meeting. This time, I chose a neutral location. Mr. Davison's formal, intimidating conference room. I told Liam to be there at 3 p.m. and to come alone. I knew, however, that he would bring his mother. She was the architect of this scheme, and she wouldn't let him face me without her guidance. I was right. They arrived together, both of them looking grim and resentful. Mr. Davison, a stately man in his late 60s, greeted them with icy professionalism and showed them into the conference room where I was waiting. Thank you for coming, I said, not getting up. Let's just get this over with. Liam grumbled, slumping into a chair across the long, polished table. Clara sat beside him. Her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. Mr. Davison placed a thick stack of documents in the center of the table. This, he announced, is a postnuptial asset protection trust. It has been drafted specifically to manage the inheritance Catherine has just received from her late grandfather's estate. He proceeded to explain the legalities in dry, precise terms. He explained that the trust would designate the inheritance as my sole and separate property, immune from any claims in the event of a divorce. He explained that by signing, Liam would be voluntarily and permanently relinquishing any and all present or future rights to these funds. When he finished, Clara spoke up, her voice sharp. And why should he sign this? What does he get out of it? He gets the quiet, uncontested divorce he so desperately wants in 1 year's time, I answered for him. He gets to walk away without me taking him to court for fraud and suing him and his girlfriend for every penny they have. That is what he gets. Liam stared at the documents, his jaw working. This was the moment of truth. He was being forced to sign away millions of dollars. The money he had sacrificed his integrity for, the money he had built a mountain of lies to obtain, was sitting on this table, and he had to legally reject it. "This is extortion," he said, his voice a low growl. "No, Liam," I said, leaning forward. "Extortion is when you demand something you aren't entitled to. This money is mine. I am simply ensuring it stays that way. You are the one who tried to take something you were never entitled to. This is just the consequence of your actions." Clara placed a restraining hand on her son's arm. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was calculating the odds. A messy public lawsuit versus a clean break in a year. The potential of getting nothing and being socially ruined versus the certainty of getting nothing but retaining some shred of their reputation. "He'll sign," she said finally, her voice tight with defeat. "But we want an addendum." Mr. Davison raised an eyebrow. "An addendum?" "Yes," Clara said, her eyes glittering with malice. "We want it stipulated in this agreement that Kate will not speak of the events of the wedding reception or the reasons for the eventual divorce to any third party. A non-disclosure agreement in effect. She wants to control the narrative? Fine. But she will not be allowed to tarnish our name." I almost laughed. After everything they had done, they were still obsessed with appearances. They wanted to silence me. "Absolutely not," I said. "Then he won't sign," Clara shot back, a smug look on her face. She thought she had found a point of leverage. "Fine," I said, shrugging. "Don't sign. I'll just have my investigator release his preliminary report to the press. The one detailing the down payment on the house with Eva. The one tracing the $50,000 cashier's check back to your local bank, Clara. I'm sure the society pages would love to read about that." Clara's face went white. She had no idea I knew about the check. She thought the cashier's check was untraceable. "What check?" she stammered. "Don't play dumb with me, Clara," I said, my patience wearing thin. "Frank is very good at his job. He's already building a timeline of your conspiracy. This document is your one and only chance to make it all go away. There will be no addendum. There will be no NDA. You will not control what I say or do. You lost that privilege when you decided to defraud me. Now, pick up the pen, Liam, and sign the papers." I pushed the documents and a pen across the table toward him. He looked from me, to his mother, to the papers. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the pen. It was the physical manifestation of his defeat. Every line he signed was an admission of his failure. Every signature was a nail in the coffin of his greedy plan. He signed every page where Mr. Davison indicated, his movements jerky and angry. When he was finished, he threw the pen down on the table. It skittered across the polished wood and fell to the floor. "There," he snarled. "It's done. Are you happy now?" "Happy is not the word I would use," I said, watching as Mr. Davison gathered the signed documents. "But I am satisfied. Our business is concluded for today. I'll see you at my cousin's christening on Sunday. Don't be late." Their exit from the law office was a study in impotent rage. Liam didn't look at me. Clara shot me a look so full of hatred it could have curdled milk. The door slammed shut behind them, leaving me alone with my lawyer in the silent, sterile room. "Congratulations, Catherine," Mr. Davison said, a rare smile touching his lips as he placed the signed trust documents into a folder. "The money is safe. You've won." I had won. I had protected my grandfather's legacy. I had turned their own trap against them. But as I sat there, I didn't feel the elation of victory. I just felt tired. And the year of this charade had only just begun. The next few months settled into a strange, tense rhythm. Life became a series of public performances. We attended the christening, smiling for photos with the baby. We went to a Thanksgiving dinner with my extended family, where Liam dutifully passed the gravy and talked about the weather. We were a portrait of a young couple working through a rough patch, and to the outside world, it seemed to be working. The drunken toast story became the accepted narrative among those who didn't know the truth. In private, we were strangers who communicated only through clipped, necessary texts about our next required appearance. We were living separate lives, bound together only by the lie we were forced to maintain. He was living with Eva, though they had to be discreet. I had moved into a new apartment, a bright, airy space that was entirely my own. I started to build a life for myself, separate from the wreckage of my marriage. Meanwhile, Frank, my investigator, continued to dig. His reports arrived in my inbox every 2 weeks, each one a fresh layer of filth on the people I had once considered family. He uncovered a trail of emails between Liam and Clara, sent from a private encrypted server. They had been sloppy. They had thought they were clever, but they weren't clever enough. The emails were damning. They laid out the entire conspiracy in cold, hard text. An email from Clara to Liam, dated 3 months before the wedding. Just get her to the altar. Once her grandfather's money is in, you can leave the little mouse and be with Eva. We'll make sure you get your half. Her father has always looked down on us. This will be our revenge. Liam's reply, I know. It's just hard pretending to love her, listening to her talk about our future. But the payoff will be worth it. Eva is being very patient. She knows what's at stake. Another from Clara, a week before the wedding. The plan for the reception is set. The public humiliation will ensure she's too ashamed to fight the divorce. She'll crawl away and hide. We will control the story from the very beginning. Reading those words felt like swallowing glass. The little mouse. That's what they called me. They hadn't just wanted my money. They had wanted to crush my spirit. They had wanted to humiliate me for their own sick satisfaction. Clara's resentment of my family's social standing was a motive I hadn't even considered. It wasn't just greed. It was class warfare. I saved every email. I had my lawyer verify their authenticity. They were my insurance policy, my trump card, my weapon of last resort. I had forced Liam to sign the trust documents under the threat of revealing what I knew. But he and Clara still believed the full extent of their plotting was a secret. They had no idea I had their entire confession, in their own words. I held on to that evidence, a ticking time bomb waiting for the right moment to detonate. The agreement was for a quiet divorce in a year. But the more I read their words, the more I understood the depth of their malice, the more I realized that a quiet escape was more than they deserved. They didn't just want to rob me. They wanted to destroy me. A quiet divorce would let them slip away into the shadows and try again with someone else. It wasn't enough. They needed to face a public reckoning. The perfect opportunity presented itself in the spring. My family's charitable foundation was hosting its annual gala, its biggest fundraising event of the year. It was the social event of the season in our city. Everyone who was anyone would be there. Business leaders, politicians, philanthropists, and of course, Liam's family was always on the guest list. His father, a respected businessman, was a longtime supporter of the foundation. This was it. This was the stage I had been waiting for. A room full of their peers, their friends, their business associates. A room full of people whose opinions they cared about more than anything else. I told Liam he was expected to be there, on my arm. He objected, of course. A huge public gala, Kate? Isn't this pushing it? We're almost halfway through the year. Can't we just lay low? No, I said, my voice firm. Our deal was that you would help me undo the damage. This is the final act. We present a united front at the biggest event of the year. We smile for the photographers. We show everyone that we are solid. After this, we can fade from the public eye until the year is up. But this event is non-negotiable. He reluctantly agreed. He had no choice. I spent the next month planning. I met with my father and showed him the emails. The color drained from his face as he read them. His expression shifted from shock to a cold, hard fury that matched my own. That monster, he whispered, looking at the printouts. And his mother. I always knew she was a snake. I want to expose them, Dad, I said. At the gala. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face. Are you sure, Catherine? That will be a very public, very ugly scene. It will put you in the spotlight all over again. I know, I said. But they tried to humiliate me in public. They deserve to be exposed in public. I don't want a quiet victory. I want justice. I want everyone to see them for who they really are. My father was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. "All right," he said, his voice grim. "Let's do it. Let's burn them to the ground." The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom was glittering, filled with hundreds of people in tuxedos and evening gowns. I walked in with Liam on my arm. He looked tense, but he was playing his part, smiling politely and nodding at acquaintances. I was wearing a stunning blood-red dress, a warrior's color. Clara was there, of course, dripping with diamonds and fake sincerity. She was holding court at a table near the front, laughing with a group of society women. She saw us walk in, and her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she recovered. She gave me a tight, hostile nod. Liam's father, Arthur, a man I had always respected, came over to greet us. He was oblivious to the scheme his wife and son had concocted. "Kate, you look wonderful," Arthur said warmly. "And Liam, good to see you. I'm glad to see you two have worked things out. We were all so worried." "We're doing great, Dad," Liam said, the lies slipping easily from his tongue. The evening progressed. There were speeches, there was an auction. I sat at the head table with my parents, with Liam beside me. He was a statue of misery, but a well-dressed one. I could feel the tension radiating from him. Finally, it was time for my father's keynote address as the chairman of the foundation. He walked to the podium and began his speech, thanking the donors and highlighting the charity's achievements. The room was quiet and attentive. And finally, my father said, his voice ringing through the ballroom, "I'd like to extend a special thanks to my family, to my wonderful wife, to my incredible daughter, Kate." He paused and looked directly at Liam and Clara. "And to my new son-in-law, Liam, and his mother, Clara, for their unique contribution to our lives this year." The phrasing was odd. A few people shifted in their seats. Liam looked at me, a question in his eyes. I gave him a small, cold smile. This was my cue. "In honor of family," my father continued, "we've put together a short tribute." The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A huge screen above the stage, which had been displaying the foundation's logo, flickered to life. It started innocently enough with a slideshow of photos, my parents, my grandparents, me as a child. Then a photo from my wedding day appeared. Me and Liam, smiling at the altar. And then the screen changed. It was no longer a photo. It was the clear, undeniable text of an email. Clara's email. "Just get her to the altar. Once her grandfather's money is in, you can leave the little mouse and be with Eva. We'll make sure you get your half." A collective gasp went through the room. People were leaning forward, squinting at the screen, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock. Then, the next email appeared. Liam's reply. "I know. It's just hard pretending to love her, but the payoff will be worth it." The room was now dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Every eye was either glued to the screen or fixed on Liam and Clara, whose faces had gone ashen. Clara looked like she was going to faint. Liam was frozen, his mouth slightly agape in horror. Then, my father's voice cut through the silence. "It seems my son-in-law was right about one thing. His wedding was indeed a lie." He stepped back from the podium, and I stood up. A stagehand handed me a microphone. My hand was shaking, but my voice, when I spoke, was perfectly clear and steady. "My husband gave a toast at our wedding," I said, my voice amplified throughout the silent ballroom. "He called our marriage a lie, and he was absolutely right. It was a lie he and his mother, Clara, concocted to defraud me of my inheritance." A low murmur swept through the crowd. This was better than any reality show. This was real, raw, and happening right in front of them. Clara found her voice. She jumped to her feet, her face a mask of furious denial. "This is slander," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. "Those emails are fake. This is a setup." "Are they fake, Clara?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. I looked directly at her. Because my private investigator, the one who uncovered these emails from your secure server, also managed to get copies of your bank statements. Would you like me to show the room the statement showing the $50,000 withdrawal from your account 2 days before a $50,000 cashier's check was used by Eva Martin to put a down payment on a house? Clara made a choked, strangled sound and sank back into her chair as if her bones had dissolved. The society women at her table were leaning away from her as if she were contagious. Now, all eyes were on Liam. He was staring at me, his face a canvas of pure terror and disbelief. He had walked into the grandest of ambushes. "Kate," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Don't." The microphone picked up his plea, broadcasting it to the entire room. "Don't what, Liam?" I asked, taking a step toward him. I am here now. My heart is a hammer in my chest, but my voice is ice. "Don't expose you. You didn't seem to have any problem exposing me to what you thought would be a lifetime of shame. You stood in front of our friends and our families, and you called me. You called our marriage a lie." I let that hang in the air for a beat. Then I turned my gaze from him and addressed the stunned audience. "He was the lie. He and his mother are the lie," I declared. "Thank you all for being here tonight to witness the truth." I placed the microphone down on the table. The silence was absolute for a moment, and then it was broken by a single person starting to clap. It was Sarah. Then another person joined in, and another. It wasn't a thunderous applause, but a slow, steady, supportive wave of it. It was for me. It was for the truth. Liam and Clara were utterly, completely ruined. They were surrounded by their peers, their business associates, the very people whose good opinion they had spent their lives cultivating. And those people were staring at them with expressions of open disgust and contempt. Without another word, Liam stumbled to his feet. He grabbed his mother's arm and practically dragged her from her chair. They fled. They didn't walk. They fled through the ballroom, a gauntlet of horrified and judgmental eyes following their every step. They pushed through the doors and disappeared into the night, leaving a bomb crater in the middle of the city's most prestigious social event. The immediate aftermath was a blur of motion and sound. My father returned to the podium and, with remarkable composure, said, "Well, now that the evening's entertainment is concluded, let us remember why we are here." He managed to get the event back on track, but the energy in the room had irrevocably shifted. The main topic of conversation for the rest of the night and for weeks to come had been set in stone. I didn't stay long. The adrenaline of the confrontation drained away, leaving me feeling hollowed out and exhausted. Sarah came to my side, her arm around my shoulders. "Let's get you home," she said softly. My parents insisted I stay with them again that night. When we got back to their house, my father poured 3 glasses of a very expensive scotch. He handed one to me. "I've never been prouder of you, Catherine," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You faced the devil and you did not blink." My mother hugged me tightly. "They will never be able to show their faces in this city again," she said with a grim satisfaction. "You did the right thing." I had done the right thing. But the victory felt heavy. I had exposed their rotten core, but in doing so, I had to relive the ugliest moments of my life in front of hundreds of people. Justice, I was learning, was not a clean or simple thing. The next morning, I filed for an annulment on the grounds of fraud. With the mountain of evidence I had, the emails, the financial records, the hundreds of witnesses from the gala, it was an open and shut case. Mr. Davison informed me that Liam's lawyer didn't even contest it. They just wanted it to be over. The marriage was declared void, legally erased as if it had never happened. My inheritance, which was already secured in the trust, was now doubly protected. The marriage had never been valid in the first place. The fallout for Liam and Clara was swift and brutal, a cascade of consequences that I observed from a distance. The story of the gala was the talk of the town. It wasn't in the mainstream press. My father had enough influence to keep it out of the papers, but it spread like wildfire through the city's social and business circles. It was far more damaging that way. a viral rumor mill that couldn't be contained or refuted. My first update came from Sarah, who helped me sort through the wedding gifts, packing them up to be returned or donated. We sat on the floor of my new apartment, surrounded by crystal vases and silver picture frames. "So, I heard from a friend who works at Liam's firm," she said, carefully wrapping a gravy boat in tissue paper. "He was fired. The managing partner was at the gala. He called Liam in the next morning and told him to clear out his desk. The firm's reputation couldn't take the hit." I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. He had wanted my money. Now he didn't even have a salary. A few days later, I got a call from Mark, Liam's cousin, the one who had given me the first clue about the plan. He sounded deeply apologetic, as if he were somehow responsible. "Kate, I just wanted to call and say, well, I guess that everyone is saying they got what they deserved," he said awkwardly. "My Uncle Arthur, Liam's dad, he's devastated and furious." "How so?" I asked, genuinely curious about the man who had seemed so decent. "He had no idea about any of it," Mark explained. "The scheme, the emails, none of it. He was publicly humiliated along with them. The word is, he kicked Clara out. They've separated. He told her he couldn't even look at her. And he cut Liam off completely, changed his will and everything. Clara had lost her husband and her social standing. Liam had lost his job and his father's support. The perfect little team had imploded. And what of Ava, the other woman, the silent partner in my humiliation? I heard about her through the grapevine as well. With Liam's promised payday gone up in smoke and his future looking bleak, she had, unsurprisingly, left him. The house they had put a down payment on fell through. She disappeared from the picture as quickly as she had entered it. She was a mercenary who had backed the wrong horse. I spent the next few months healing. I sold the apartment Liam and I had once shared, purging the last physical remnants of our life together. With a portion of my inheritance, I did something I had always dreamed of doing. I started my own business, a small consulting firm in a field I was passionate about. I poured my energy into building something new, something that was entirely mine. Life became quiet again, but it was a good quiet, a peaceful quiet. The drama faded into the background, becoming a story I no longer had to live inside of. About a year after the annulment, I was having coffee with my father at a small cafe downtown. It was a bright, sunny afternoon. "You seem happy." "Catherine?" he said, smiling at me over his cup. "I am," I replied, and I was surprised to find that it was the absolute truth. The anger had faded, leaving behind not a scar, but a kind of strength I never knew I possessed. "Have you heard from him at all?" my father asked gently. "From Liam?" "No," I said, taking a sip of my latte. "And I don't expect to. I heard he moved out of the state, working some low-level sales job. I don't think he can afford to live here anymore." "Good," my father said with a firm nod. "Good. You handled that entire affair with a grace I couldn't have managed." I looked out the window at the people walking by on the sidewalk, living their own ordinary, undramatic lives. I thought about the girl in the white dress, sitting alone at the head table, her world collapsing around her. She felt like a different person, someone I knew a long time ago. "He wanted to make me feel small," I said, my voice quiet but sure. "He wanted to make me a witness to his lie. That was his goal. To shrink me, to shame me into silence." I turned back to my father, a small smile on my lips. Instead, I made him the subject of a truth he could never escape. I said, "He finally learned what it feels like to have everyone see you for exactly who you are.